What we're talking about today is the anatomy of passion. And Gregory and I make jokes that we create these titles and then we, give it a minute and then we just really let whatever wants to emerge, emerge. So the anatomy of passion, I'm curious, before I even launch into what that means to me in this moment, if you could please kind of shout out some answers. When I say passion, what comes to mind for you? What is passion?
Romance.
Energy, love, enthusiasm, purpose, music, imagination, romance. Oh yes, that's a passion. That's a really interesting one, isn't it? Yes. What else? What else is passion? God consciousness. Creativity. Okay, so passion. I'm thinking about passion, I'm being with passion, and I'm recognizing that it is the enthusiasm and the energy that creates. It's the enthusiasm and the energy that creates everything in our life, that activates it. I think of it as the fuel, if you will, for the great fire within that gets to be expressed outward. And I want to be really clear that enthusiasm and passion can be used in a lot of different ways. I have been very passionate about a lot of things that caused a lot of harm in my own life and others. And I've been really passionate about things that have served the world and myself in a really beautiful way. So what I'm curious about is that really interesting duality of experiences. So to me, it's not the passion. The passion is the activating force. So how do we move into creating a world through and with our passion that we want to experience? I want to acknowledge Gregory. Wow, I'm thinking, let's get him back up here for 20 more minutes. That was incredible. Speaking so beautifully to what the mystics have been saying for centuries that science is catching up with. Isn't that amazing? And I find myself saying that almost every time I talk now, because if you look at ancient wisdom and quantum physics, so similar, right? So similar. I'm thinking about our ability to perceive and imagining that in this room right now, there are probably ants in this room. There's some type of insect in here, I'm sure. Do they have any ability to understand what we're doing here? There's no way an ant can understand what we're doing, and then we imagine the vastness of consciousness and of life's experience, and we think we know. Right? I think I know what's going on here. And yet an ant is living in its universe perfectly, but has no way of knowing what we're up to. I remember being a very small child and sitting with two things, and I guess, it's very interesting because people talk about that their life purpose is something they knew really early on. And I used to say, that's not my story. That's not my story. I never knew I was going to do ministry. I never knew I was going to do spirituality as my passion. And the more I've sort of I've awoken to this idea of consciousness and the evolution of consciousness, I recognize that it is true. I had a lot of questions when I was a little one. I wasn't really buying the answers I was hearing either. I was like, really? Do you really believe that? And I remember being a very small child and learning very quickly to keep some of that to myself. I remember being in the car with my good friend. I sang in the Episcopal Church in a men and boys choir, very traditional English choir. I love the Episcopal Church. It's the original don't ask, don't tell religion. Do whatever you want, just don't talk about it, right? Unless you're using humor, then we can make jokes about everything that we're doing. And that is really the framework. But I was in the back seat of the car with my good friend and his mother. Now, his mother was part of a different church. I don't know what it was. But I remember saying, do you know there are people that actually believe it rained and rained and rained and the entire earth flooded, and there's this one guy that made this big boat and took 2 of every animals, and that's how the world was repopulated? And I'll never forget the look in the rearview mirror. I'll never forget it. She said, the Bible says that's true, it must be true. Fascinating. We're always interpreting. We're always interpreting. And I'm sitting with what Gregory was speaking about and a recognition of what the world needs right now. It's a paraphrase, and I don't even know who said it. The world does not need more famous people. The world needs healers, mystics, and those of us growing in consciousness. Do you know who it was?
The Dalai Lama.
The Dalai Lama. Well, yes, of course it was. The Dalai Lama. Well, I'm really grateful you brought him up, because this is really interesting. What I was about to say, I knew was from the Dalai Lama, and this is what's interesting in New Thought circles. Because in New Thought, we talk a lot about knowing that it's all within us, and that love is within us, and that's how we experience love, that we can't get it from outside, that it's truly who we are, and that it's about us expressing it. Then the Dalai Lama comes along and says, no one can truly be satisfied unless we're living a life of service, unless we're living a life of love. Now I'm going to go back to romantic passion for a moment. Romantic passion can be looking for love out there to bring something to me. I've been really passionate about that. I've been really passionate about finding the person that's going to fix me. I spent many years doing that, not consciously, because I would have never told you that. I'm not doing that. But then when he didn't text back, oh no, it was before texting. When he didn't call back, I was heartbroken, right? So that gave me some information of what I was hoping to find. You know, I work as a counselor, I work in a lot of different arenas, all under one umbrella. In my counseling realm, there's a common thing that people say, I keep attracting unavailable people. Why do I keep attracting unavailable people? I have a very different perspective on this. I ask the question, what do you want them to be available for? Because if I want them to change me or to complete me, wow, that's asking a lot. And it's not actually possible. We know that now. All of us sitting in this room recognize, at least on some level, that this has to come from within. So for me, this idea of passion, how do we harness passion to serve the world? And I recognize that when I'm holding the heart of service, passion is energizing, it's electric. I feel more and more energy when I'm living in that truth. And I'm going back to the now I know Dalai Lama quote about being famous or serving the world. Being a healer, because I, at some points, really wanted to be famous. Now the enthusiasm I was using toward that was kind of exhausting. So if you're finding yourself kind of exhausted, you might ask yourself the question, what am I passionate about? What am I passionate about today in this moment? When I am passionate about serving the world, I feel energized. People will often say to me, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do everything that you do. And my response is, I don't either. But what I do know, is that I'm passionate about helping people awaken to the truth of who and what they are. I'm going to be really clear about why I have that passion. Because that's what happened for me, and that's how my life got transformed. I went through a lot of darkness, more than once in my life. It's interesting, though, I went through it at 20 and 40. I'm not going to affirm that I need to go through that at 60. I'm ready to have a different experience. What has been the most transformative experience in your life? When were those times that you went through the dark night of the soul? And what I mean by dark night of the soul isn't I feel sad. Sadness is part of the human experience so far, but I don't know that it needs to be, but we're going to maybe bookmark that. I may or may not get back to that. The dark night of the soul is a time when we are going into the deepest part of ourselves to really transform ourselves and let go of and release all those ideas of separation and fear and otherness, so that we can come more fully into the deepest truth of who and what we are, which is love. That's love with a capital L, which is different than what we might think of as passionate love. Although I like passionate love, it's fun. Because everything in the human realm also exists, right? Isn't that amazing? I thought and I believed that the spiritual journey was going to be me reaching a place where I was completely free of my ego, and that I had arrived in this place of absolute stillness and joy. Well, here's what's interesting. That is what's happened. But not the way that I thought it was going to look. See, because I thought what that meant is that I wouldn't experience anything in the outer realm. Everyone was going to be loving to me. Everyone was going to be nice. I'd no longer have any kind of challenges. What I recognize now is that I come at all of those from a different level of consciousness. So I'm going to kind of say that again, because what I hoped is the world would stop doing things to me. Right? That victim level of consciousness. Listen very carefully to the words you're saying. Not because those words create reality, but those words let us know what we're holding at a deep level. That's what creates reality. That's what creates. And I know Unity says, thought, tell them, mind, produce after their kind, and I think thoughts are actually a doorway into the energy that we're holding. When I absolutely know the truth of who and what I am, anything can happen, and I can be at peace. See, when we shift to how do I serve the paradigm, how do I serve the world, everything changes. So the greatest paradox is I don't need anything from the world, and yet I need, it seems, to love and connect. But what's different is I'm not looking for the world to fix me, because I'm not broken. What happens when we really know we're whole and perfect? What happens when we know that for sure? So Jerry and I were having a really wonderful conversation before the service started about Centurions. Centurions, of course, are people that live to be 100. And I found out today that only 1 in 5,000 people in our country live to be 100. And of course, we have one in our midst. Isn't that amazing? So I watched this incredible documentary on Centurions, and doctors, of course, medical doctors, were looking for all the medical reasons that these people live to be 100. So diet, exercise, all the things we think of as health. And what they found is that it wasn't that at all. That it was mental, emotional, and spiritual. And they found a few qualities of Centurions. And Jerry said one of them today. That's what brought this all on. Here's the number one thing. They let things go. I actually think that they don't even let things go. They don't even hold on to things. It's like forgiveness is a way of being. That was one of the qualities that all the Centurions held. They said, I don't have time to hold grudges. I don't have time to look for revenge. I don't have time to judge. Let it go. Let it go. That was one. The other one was they stay busy. Now that one makes sense, right? But they activate their mind in some way. You know, we have some story that like, I'm going to go, there's a certain age and I'm going to go to my rocking chair on the front porch. As soon as we've done that, right, yeah, so they stay active in something, even if it's crossword puzzles. There was one Centurion that he said, I work 3 crossword puzzles every day. That was his passion, and that's what kept him engaged and alive. Those were the 2 things. The third thing, and I don't remember the rest of them, there were like 4 or 5 things. The third thing is, of course, we all know this at Unity, that they looked at the world through the lens of, they called it glass half full. I actually have a different perspective on that. I look at it as the glass is both half full and half empty. Right? The master knows it's both, and we get to choose to experience the half full. It's tricky because we're not necessarily talking about the power of positive thinking, and yet we are. Because what it means is, it doesn't mean that we need to not see or pretend that it's not real, right? The joke of the different types of ministers that go into hell and what they say about it, and the Unity ministers get there and say, it's not hot, I don't feel hot, nothing's burning here, when they're in the middle of it. This isn't about pretending it's not real. This is about the consciousness I bring to the situation. And what that involves for me is a continual inner journey of what the ideas I'm holding about the world, what are the core ideas and the felt sense, that energy field that I am, what am I holding? So we pay attention to the language so that we know how we're being with ourselves in the world. So in closing, what I want to say is, what do I want to say? You know, I'm really known for saying in closing I want to say, and then about 8 more minutes usually. But I don't think that's true today. I think I'm really ready to close this because simply said, just as Gregory talked about today, what are the beliefs and ideas that you're holding about the world, and is it possible that that isn't as real as you once believed? You know, of course, I think I said this even the last time I was here. Albert Einstein said, reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. So what are you focusing on? What are you calling it? What have you decided about yourself in the world today? And is it possible to have a different viewpoint? See, I'm going back to the Centurion thing. I imagine that we can live 200 or 300 years. I actually think that's true. But we have decided that that's not true. Now I know anyone who in here is a doctor or a medical profession might challenge that. Thank you for laughing. Right, we have collective consciousness, and collective consciousness, that's the albeit persistent part that Einstein was talking about, I imagine. Collective consciousness. Collective consciousness. Do I want to be part of the collective consciousness? Yes and no. Here's the thing, I don't want to get pulled into, in other words, CNN, and no judgment about them in particular, but that drama that Gregory was talking about that's so seductive. So seductive. Or do I want to absolutely stand in the deepest truth that eternity is happening now, and when I'm in the present moment, I am energized, 100% energized, and I have the passion for my life. When I move away from the stories and beliefs of collective consciousness and my individual consciousness. And then here's the thing. Once I do that, I'm part of the collective consciousness because I'm part of serving the evolution that's happening so powerfully right now on this planet. So when we shift from the illusion of what we call reality, recognizing that it is a shadow that we're casting, so what do we need in order to cast a shadow? We need light. Without light, there is no shadow. So thank you, shadow. Thank you for all the shadow that shows up in the world and in my own life. I'm going to turn to the light. And see, the truth is, I'm going to be the light. You know, there's not a light at the end of the tunnel. You are the light in the tunnel. And once I get that, everything changes. So, in closing, in closing, know that you are light. If no one has told you today, you are a magnificent expression of the one power. Who am I to say that I'm not God? Right, Jerry? Who am I to say that I'm not God? If we know that we're all part of that, and I'm not saying I am God and you are not. I'm saying we are all emanations of that one power, that source energy. That is who you are. My invitation is for you to simply be that and see what happens. Thank you all very much for your attention.